Well, hello again. This is the 17th of January 2020. And this is another Aughty Thoughty, as you can see. Today I am going to be talking about the spin of all spins, which is spin itself. Which I think it is, for me personally, maybe not for everybody, but certainly to my mind, probably the most magical part of being autistic in a lot of ways. It's this thing that just happens to you, and it's very joyful. It's very weird. It's very hard to explain. But I'm going to try and do that myself because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding from non-autistics about what it actually is. It's often described as an interest. Is it an interest? It's a special interest, but it's not exactly like what neurotypical people see as a hobby or a field of expertise. It's something that's very deeply personal to each individual. Apparently, the attention deficit guys have what they call hyperfocus, which is quite similar, and they just sort of the attention deficit mind sort of jumps from one thing to another very quickly, sort of leaves a lot of things unfinished, but then occasionally just lands on something that it really connects with somehow, and they'll sort of sit for a whole evening reading about one particular subject, or trying to do one individual task, until they become absolutely exhausted by it. It's similar to that, except it can go on a lot longer. There are some people who have spins that last their entire lives, or some that sort of come and go as a kind of undercurrent and then can just bubble up at any moment. Like I've one in entomology, in insects and things. I mean, when I was a very small child, I used to just be absolutely fascinated by going out in the garden, watching insects running around and try and catch them in jars and try and keep, little wormeries and things going for a while. And, it was just absolutely fascinating with the whole world of insects and ecosystems and how they live and all the little legs and the patterns on them, and I was just sort of absolutely entranced by them. And then it was something that I forgot about for a long time. It's one of those things, just every so often something comes up that sets me off again. I had a job working on a nature reserve. It was just a temporary job for 6 months, but I was just absolutely in my element. Just teaching little kids about all the different wildlife and the insects and the food chains and things. And recently I found some little beetles that I didn't recognise in my garden, and I've actually got them in a jar on my windowsill. I've had them there for a while actually. They're called rosemary beetles, and I started reading up about them and sort of looking on identification websites and things, and it just set me off again, learning about a different kind of beetle that I had no idea about. And and it broadens out, to sometimes a spider, I'll just see a little spider. I just, so really focus on the little spider for a moment and sort of really, connect with this spider, and then just sort of pop it outside. It's only quite recently actually that I realised people who are scared of spiders, they're not joking. It is a sort of genuine fear. And I still don't understand why people are afraid of spiders and insects. But yes, it's only quite, over the last couple of years that I've realised people aren't, it's not just one of these national running jokes that I don't get. People do genuinely scream and run away when they see spiders. So I'll try and describe what it's like. I'd say the nearest thing the nearest thing to having a spin for a non-autistic person would be being in love. I mean, I'm not sure exactly whether, you know, we experience love in the same way as neurotypical people. But I'd say I have a fairly good handle on what it's like for them, you know, from living in a culture that's sort of saturated with songs and films and books that are about, you know, neurotypicals in love. Is this idea that you become obsessed with something, but in a really you know, it's not an unhealthy way. It's perfectly natural. There's nothing wrong with it. It's something that, you know, keeps your brain very active. And it's absolutely fascinating. I think that the process of how it begins and how it ends, and what actually goes on when you're in the midst of one, is absolutely fascinating. And how it differs from, you know, just enjoying something. As an example, you know, me and my husband, we've been watching Fargo together lately. I've got the, you know, box set of the DVDs for Christmas. I thought, oh, we'll watch this. It's entertaining, you know. I've enjoyed it. I've been sort of emotionally and intellectually engaged by it, and with the characters and the plot lines. And we sort of sat and discussed the sort of cinematography and what have you. And it was really enjoyable. It was a good use of my time, you know. I was sort of quite looking forward to when my son went to bed so he could put the next episode on, you know. But it's not a spin, you know. I mean, I won't forget it, but it won't become a big part of my life for a long time. I've got no particular desire to watch all the extras on the DVDs. I might have a look one day if I've got nothing else to do, but it's certainly not a priority for me. I'm not going to, you know, be writing fanfics about it, or spending much time sort of looking for characteristics of the various characters in people I know. So that is something that I've just enjoyed on a perfectly normal neurotypical sort of a level. A spin is much deeper than that. For example, my big spin from, you know, the last few months has been, as I've said in previous previous videos, Button Moon. I'm absolutely in love with Button Moon. I've sort of created a whole universe around, inspired by the shows. I've sort of been writing about it. I've sort of created my own vision of, you know, where the characters come from and what their, you know, their backstories are, and what happened when they got old. And it's a constant thing for me, you know. You know, there's always some little background buzz of button mooniness going on in my mind. Just trying to find ways of shoehorning it into conversation. You know, I've got a little badge, bought a little badge on eBay. Yeah, I do quite often look through eBay looking for, you know, various bits of Button Moon stuff you can still kind of get hold of occasionally. There isn't a lot. There isn't a lot of sort of merchandise about. Sort of little badges and key rings and stuff. Most of them are sort of retrospective things. A series of books published at the time, which are, you know, occasionally coming up for sale. I've got a couple of them, and they're all right. And it's strange, it's not actually available on DVD. There's a few sort of compilations of episodes, but you can't sort of buy the lot of it on DVD. even on YouTube, there's some episodes that are missing. I'm not sure where someone got the episodes from to put on YouTube. Anyway, yeah, and I realise that not everyone wants to talk about it all the time, even if they do sort of remember it and sort of want to kind of oh yeah, what was the name of that character with the that had the thingy. I still sort of I realise that they don't necessarily want to have the kind of in-depth conversations about the the kind of relationships between characters and the possibilities, what might have happened, in sort of alternatives to various episodes. They don't kind of remember every word of it like I do. And that kind of sort of real over analysis, far beyond what the creators ever intended anyone to do, is a big part of the part of the nature of spin when it's related to popular culture. Of course, it's not always related to popular culture. It can be something very specific. I have talked before about my spin on front doors. Why front doors? I don't know. I can't explain that. I can't say what it is about someone's door that I find so absolutely fascinating. About the way they're constructed, and the sort of arrangement of the windows and the handles and things and the fashions throughout the years. Well, why is that? I don't have any sort of traumatic memory involving a front door. I had very little interest in them at all until a couple of years ago. I decided I wanted to buy one. Replace the front door that came with the house, and start looking up all the different styles and materials, things your little features you can have, fancy handles and stuff, and realising that it's a very big subject, and why, but how's it stayed with me? Why do I walk down streets looking at everyone's door and sort of, oh, that's a nice one. Oh, I don't like the look of that one. Oh, I bet that one's really secure. Oh, that's really old. Oh, that's a fancy one. I bet that's an antique front door. What's all that about? I don't understand it myself, but it's something that has sort of really captivated me. And with a subject like that, because it is so specific and so esoteric, there's a point at which you can kind of feel that you become an expert in it, and that sort of gives us a bit of a buzz, I suppose. But again, it's something that nobody else is particularly interested in. It's not something you can talk about at length for a long time with anybody else, because they just don't have any sort of contribution to make. You probably bore them. Just literally bore them. They really don't want to hear about this. It's of no interest to them whatsoever. And I think one of the the big joys of a spin is when it begins and you just feel like something really wonderful is happening to you, and it just sort of fills you with enthusiasm, and it gives you a bit a buzz. It's quite thrilling. What is this wonderful thing that is happening to me in connection with this particular, whatever it is, this subject, this book, this particular period of history. I mean, what? anything. It can be absolutely anything. And I think part of that, just the surprise. It can just really take you by surprise sometimes, and it's a lovely surprise. I've got my new spin. I've fallen in love again. And you can fall in love with as many subjects as you like, as many times as you like. Sometimes repeatedly. Sometimes you fall very deeply in love. Sometimes it's just a little fling. And the places it takes you as well. It can bring you to your next spin. It can bring you to learning a new language. I started learning Welsh once. I mean, I'm not exactly fluent. I can sort of muddle my way through a conversation, because I had a bit of a spin about Wales. Have a bit of Welsh heritage, so learning about my family tree. I sort of having a look at my the Welsh branch, from my nan. She's from down in Pontypridd originally, and I learned Welsh. I can speak another language now. That's amazing. And then it sort of set me off learning about the grammatical structure of the Gaelic languages, which is a whole subject in itself. And Welsh history and Welsh culture, and it's it's a very big subject. But yeah, I learnt Welsh. And it starts to things like that. They sort of set you off on a completely different path. I actually travelled to Wales so I could try out some of my Welsh. No, nobody actually talked to me in Welsh. I think it's very much the done thing there to speaking somebody in English until you actually know that they speak Welsh. I didn't sort of engage with anybody to the point that we'd sort of talk about whether we spoke Welsh or not. It was only sort of can I have a cup of tea, please? And a slice of Barra-Breath. Thank you very much. See you later. Where was I? Yeah, and then they end. They sometimes come to an end. Sometimes they end very abruptly. You can be shocked out of a spin. The biggest example was when I was sort of very into silent comedy, especially Buster Keaton. I mean, Buster Keaton was my absolute hero. I was watching Buster Keaton films most days. And I started to read about his life, and he just came across as such an utter bastard that I ended up hating him. I mean, it still marks this period of my life. When I was around 20, 21. It was everything else that I was doing at that time was kind of coloured by my love of Buster Keaton. Although the place where I worked at the time, and people that I knew at the time, there's still people who sort of associate at some level with my Buster Keaton spin. But yeah, it came to this very abrupt, very angry sort of end. I read his autobiography. I did not take to him one bit. I think things like the way he treated his wives and his children. I think was it was well, I'll not dwell on it. I'll not dwell on it. But yes, I had a really big fallout with Buster Keaton. And I think to some extent that it I mean it seems a bit fatuous to call it a trauma, But it did sort of really change my outlook on famous people in general. I just kind of stopped trusting them altogether. I don't really have fandoms with famous people like I used to, because I've always got this sort of fear in the back of my mind that, maybe they'll just disappoint me in the same way that Buster Keaton did. And sometimes they do just fizzle out. They sort of, you've done all you can with that particular spin. It's no longer relevant to you. It's been encompassed by something else, maybe. Sometimes they just get a bit boring after a while. I was crazy about Camberwick Green for a good few months. It's faded from view to some extent. I mean, I still enjoy it. I've still got my little Windy Miller doll. He's still my little buddy. I've still got some of the books. I think probably to some extent the books killed it off. Maybe. I read a lot of the books and they were just so badly put together, a lot of them, that I became quite disappointed, a bit disillusioned maybe. And I mean the show itself, I still really like, but I don't feel the need to keep watching it over and over because I've seen it enough times. I still enjoy it. I still remember, and if anyone wants to start a conversation with me about it, as they never ever do, I would be only too glad to join in with that. But yeah, it's not really at the forefront of my mind anymore. They never quite go away altogether. Again, it's this thing like being in love. It always defines a kind of period in your life. When you've got a really, really deep spin. I can kind of trace the story of my life through the various favourite things that I have had. As much as by, places where I lived, or, what I was doing in terms of school or jobs or anything like that. They are a really huge part of your world while you're in the midst of one. Yeah, like relationships, they do begin. They are lovely. You have a honeymoon period, and they become just part of the background noise of your day-to-day existence, and then they either gradually fade away or end with a big bang. And some of them do sort of stick around for the rest of your life. Yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit as well about vicarious spins, because this is something that's only really happened to me since I've had a child. I find to kind of catch them off him. I mean, as far as I'm aware, he is a neurotypical child, but as toddlers do, he is 3. As toddlers do, he gets these sort of fixations on certain toys, certain cartoons, things that he's really enjoying. He gets absolutely involved with. It's probably one of the things, being 3 years old, it's, he doesn't have much understanding of fantasy and reality. He doesn't have, a job or bills to pay or anything. So, his favourite toy or his favourite TV series is, the most important thing in his life. So I find sometimes, one of the things that he's really into starts to sort of rub off on me to a certain extent. I mean, not to the point of me calling it my own spin, but to in a sort of watered down version of one maybe. Like when he was two, he loved diggers. I mean, he's kind of a bit bored of them now, but he was crazy about diggers for a long time. Anything that any sort of construction machinery really, he'd be pointing at it, shouting, "Digger, digger, digger! Steamroller, steamroller!" And I don't know. It's I'd never had any interest in that before. I've been sort of aware they were there, but I'd never looked twice at them. And suddenly, because my little boy is really crazy about things, they start becoming interesting to me as well. And he wants to know all about the bits of machinery and what makes them move and what they're doing and things, and it kind of puts that in my mind as well and makes me think of it and makes me sort of see it from another angle and kind of understand why is it interesting to him. Sorry, tea getting cold. Can't leave it any longer. And I found myself, becoming interested in diggers as well, and learning about booms and rams and backhoe loaders and all that kind of thing. And I wouldn't say it was my special interest, but it was something that I became interested in because of him. And things that I wouldn't necessarily think of to study. I was very into Bob the Builder for a long time. When it was on when I was a teenager, I wasn't. I never watched it until my husband came home with a DVD. That he got at Poundland and said, "Oh well, we'll just watch this. This will entertain him for a little while." And he was obsessed with it all of a sudden. And I became very interested in it, and I was sort of appreciated it as a piece of art, and getting involved with the characters and everything. And I think the really good thing about Bob the Builder specifically is that it peaked in popularity about 10-20 years ago. So all the toys and books and things, they're not exactly sort of classic antiques, and they aren't the latest thing. So they're extremely cheap to pick up in shops. So I got I start getting into collecting all the toys and things. And he was enjoying it. Oh yeah, I'm getting these for my son, but they're sort of for me as well. And then they they kind of make me think of him, and they make me smile, and you know, yeah, vicarious spins. They're a thing I've discovered all by myself. Yes, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that because a very small person I think has just woken from his nap, so I've got to go and see him, and I'll see you next time.